So this is the Soundboks Gen 4. It's a super durable Bluetooth speaker that sounds better and it's more power efficient than its predecessor. But today we're going to see how the Soundboks Gen 4 stacks up to both the JBL Partybox 710 and the Sony XV900. Two loud portable Bluetooth speakers that have built-in light features, but they're not as durable. Now regarding pricing, all of these speakers are up there. The JBL Partybox 710 has a retail price of $800, the Sony XV900 has a retail price of $900, but it likes to go on sale sometimes for $800. And then there's the Soundboks Gen 4, which has a retail price of $1,000. Now all three of these speakers are great, but they are very different from one another. So depending on your needs, you'll be better off with one over the other. Nonetheless, if you want to pick any of these speakers up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, pick up a big head approved hat, linked down below. We've got trucker hats and snapbacks. By buying a hat, you help the unbiased and unsponsored videos coming, and it also helps us cover more products and produce more versus videos. Thank you to everyone who's already bought a hat, and look out for more designs coming soon. And also, please remember to hit that like button and let's get subscribed. Now first, let's talk about the design of these speakers. Now, one of the main selling points of the Soundboks 4 is that it's fairly compact and it's lightweight, weighing in at 35.5 pounds. So carrying this speaker and taking the speaker on the go with you is a lot easier than these other two speakers, which are just larger and much heavier. Now, both the 710 and XV900 have built-in wheels, and the wheels on the 710 are a lot better than the wheels on the XV900. But still, sometimes it is a two-person job to move either of these two speakers around. Whereas with the Soundboks, one single person should be able to transport the speaker, and it's also easier to cram into places. But also, the Soundboks is just a lot more durable than these other two speakers. It has an aluminum frame and silicone balls on each corner to absorb impacts. It has a tougher poplar cabinet. The steel frame on the front is a lot sturdier, and it's waterproof. Whereas with these other two speakers, they're a lot more fragile because they have a mostly plastic body. So both the JBL and Sony are going to be better suited to mainly live in your man cave. But the thing with these two speakers is that they both have built-in light features, which I will admit look pretty good. Personally, I think JBL's light feature looks a little more dynamic than Sony's light feature, but nonetheless, these light features could be a minor selling point over the Soundboks. However, if you were to use the light feature on the Sony XV900, that is going to take an additional toll on the battery life. Now, the Sony XV900 has an advertised battery life of 25 hours, but that's with this speaker playing at 30% volume, but with the mega bass feature turned on, which is good, but that's with the light feature turned off. However, if you were to use this speaker with its light feature turned on, then your battery life is going to go down to 12 hours. But if you were to use this speaker at max volume and with the mega bass feature turned on and with the light feature turned on, then the battery life is going to be good for up to 4 hours of playback time. But definitely, battery life on the XV900 really varies depending on how you use it, whether you have the light feature turned on or the mega bass feature or just its volume. But then there's the JBL Partybox 710, and this speaker actually does not have a built-in battery. It looks like it has a built-in battery, and a lot of people assumes that it has a built-in battery, but it doesn't. With the Partybox 710, you can only use it while it's plugged in. So this speaker just isn't as portable or as versatile as these other two speakers. But then there's the Soundboks 4. Now, first off, if you were to use this speaker while in its stock EQ at 50% volume, then it's going to be good for around 40 hours of playback time. But if you were to use this speaker at max volume while in its stage EQ, which is the EQ setting that you want to use if you want to get the most out of this speaker because it's going to get louder and it's going to have more bass, then it's going to be good for around 6 hours of playback time, which is very impressive. And also, this is longer than the Sony XV900 when it's playing at max volume, and max volume on the Soundboks 4 is significantly louder than max volume on the Sony XV900. But the really cool thing about the Soundboks 4 is that you can easily swap out the batteries. So if you have multiple batteries, you can easily keep the party going by just swapping them out, and this is something that you can't do with these other speakers. Now, regarding connectivity, both the JBL and Sony can be connected to two devices at the same time, so you and a friend can both be DJ. Whereas with the Soundboks can only be connected to one device at a time. But with all of these speakers, they have an audio jack, so you can always just use them with a wired connection. However, with both the JBL and Soundboks, they both have an audio out jack, so you can always daisy chain any other speaker to these two speakers and get them to play in sync. Whereas with the Sony, it doesn't have an audio out jack. However, it does have an optical port, so if you want, you can always use it as a soundbar with your TV. And also, with both the JBL and Sony, they do have USB ports, so you can always plug in a USB stick and play music off of it. Whereas with the Soundboks, you can't.
And finally, with all of these speakers, you can plug in 2 1/4-inch microphones for karaoke, or you can plug in a guitar. However, with the Soundboks, it is using an XLR combo jack. So if you want, you can also plug in a mixer. So if you're somebody that likes to moonlight as a DJ, then you might want to go with the Soundboks. However, if you're a much more casual type of user, and you're just looking for a speaker because you want to do karaoke, then you might want to go with the JBL. Because with the JBL, you can easily adjust the sound of your microphone either from the control panel up top or through JBL's app. And here you can adjust the bass, you can also adjust the treble if you want to, or you can also add an echo if you really want to. Now personally, I never really use an echo on my microphone, but it's there if you want it.
But with all of that out of the way, let's talk about sound. Regarding speaker setups, these speakers are fairly different from one another. With the Soundboks, we have a dual front firing woofers with exhaust ports that shoot out the sides, and we have a single tweeter horn. Whereas with the JBL, it has a dual front firing woofers with an exhaust port that shoots out the back, and it has a dual front firing tweeters. And finally, there's the Sony XV900, which has a single front firing woofer with an exhaust port that shoots out the front. It has a dual front firing mid-range drivers, and it has a total of 6 tweeters, 2 shoot out the front, 1 on each side, and there are 2 that shoot slightly upwards and towards the back. But now we're going to jump into the sound test. Now, so that the Sony XV900 can keep up, we're going to use it while it's plugged in, because if you use the speaker while it's plugged in, you are going to get a performance boost out of it. It's going to get louder and it's going to have more bass. Whereas with the Soundboks, you don't get a performance boost out of it if you use it while it's plugged in. And the JBL can only be used while it's plugged in. But all of these speakers are playing at 75% volume. Sony has its mega bass feature turned on. The Soundboks is using its stage EQ, which is the EQ setting that you want to use if you want to get the most out of this speaker. And the JBL is playing with its stock EQ, but with its bass boost set to deep.
She got a body like a goddess, and she talks so sweet. It's like I can't believe I'm the one that she wanted. And if I'm really being honest, I know I could be everything she needs if she let me get on it. Yeah. So come here, baby, listen close, hold me tight, don't let me go. Girl, you know that I'ma want you all my life. So I'ma let you keep me up another time. But please don't stay the night. Don't try to change my mind. Baby, please don't stay the night. I'ma do what's right. Don't make me ask you twice. Oh, don't stay the night. Don't try to turn it to a fight. You know I love you by my side. Just don't stay the night. I'ma do what's right. I'm done being polite. Oh, don't stay the night. She'll always find a way around it. I thought she'd be gone, but when I woke up in the morning, she was laying beside me. She know when she wanted. I can never turn her down. Oh, I probably should have kicked her out by now. But you're the finest of them all. Make me lose my self-control. All I wanna do is make you feel alright. You drive me crazy, turn me on, and that's the reason I'ma let you go. 'Cause you ain't Please don't stay the night. Don't try to change my mind. Please don't stay the night. Almost do what's right. Don't make me ask you twice. Oh, don't stay the night. Don't try to turn it to a fight. You know I love you by my side. Just don't stay the night. Almost do what's right. I'm gonna be ever light. Oh, don't stay the night.
So first, I feel that we need to adjust max volume performance on these speakers. Now, like I mentioned earlier, in this sound test, the Sony XV900 was playing while it's plugged in, because while it's plugged in, you are going to get a performance boost out of it. It's going to get louder and it's going to have more bass, because if you use it while it's running off of its internal battery, you're going to get a performance decrease. But even while it's plugged in, the Sony XV900 still struggles to keep up with these other two speakers, max volume wise. Nonetheless, this speaker gets plenty loud, but it just doesn't get as loud as these other two speakers. But then there's the Soundboks 4. With this speaker, you don't get a performance boost out of it while it's plugged in, and as a matter of fact, you shouldn't use this speaker past 50% volume while it's plugged in and charging. But still, this speaker gets a little louder than the JBL Partybox 710, which is very impressive because the Soundboks is running off of its built-in battery, whereas the 710 is plugged in. But when it comes to the actual sound performance of these speakers, with the 710, this speaker has the most thunderous and most violent bass here. The bass on the speaker will literally rearrange the furniture in your house. But the 710 still sounds balanced and the mids and highs are still well defined. Whereas with the bass on the Soundboks Gen 4, it also has an impressive amount of physicality to it, but its bass is a lot more on the audible side when compared to the 710. But definitely with the Soundboks 4, this speaker sounds a lot more balanced and it's a lot more fuller than its predecessor, because it used to lean more towards a brighter sound signature, but that's not the case with the Soundboks 4. And finally, there's the Sony XV900. Now, since this speaker doesn't get as loud as these other two speakers, it's just not going to have as much physicality in its bass. But in general, with the Sony XV900, this speaker has a much more neutral sound signature to it, and its bass leans the most towards the audible side here. Overall, the Soundboks 4 sounds good and it gets very loud, but if you want that thunderous bass, then you're still going to want to go with the JBL Partybox 710, and then there's the Sony XV900. Now, even though the speaker doesn't get as loud as these other two speakers, relatively speaking, the Sony XV900 still gets very loud, and you get the best of both worlds with this speaker. You get a light feature like the Partybox 710, but it's also portable thanks to its built-in battery like the Soundboks 4. But finally, let's talk about pairing these speakers up with other speakers. Now, with the Soundboks 4, you can always wirelessly pair it up to any other Soundboks 4, a Soundboks 3, or to a Soundboks Go. And you can have up to 5 soundboxes playing together. And through Soundboks' app, you can actually go in and assign what role you want each speaker to play. So if you want, you can always get any 2 soundboxes and get them to play in left and right stereo mode. Whereas with the Partybox, you can wirelessly connect it to a Partybox Encore, a 110, a 310, a 710, or to a Partybox Ultimate, and you can only have a total of 2 Partyboxes wirelessly connected to one another. And if you want to get left and right stereo sound going, you do have to have 2 of the exact same speakers. But then there's the Sony. Now, you can always wirelessly pair it up to any of Sony's other larger box speakers, like let's say an XV900, XV800, XP700, or to an XP500. Or you can also pair your larger Sony box speakers to any of Sony's smaller speakers, like let's say an XG500, XG300, XE300, XE200, or to an XB43, XB33, or XB23, and you can have up to 100 speakers paired together. And personally, I really like having this type of versatility with a Sony speaker pairing protocol. However, if you do want to get left and right stereo sound going, then you are going to need 2 of the exact same speakers. And also, even though Sony speaker pairing protocol is very accommodating, sometimes it can be a bit of a hassle to use. Sometimes it can take a while for all of your speakers to get paired together. Sometimes you might have to go through the pairing process multiple times, and sometimes echoes do form. Now, I'm not saying that this is always happens, but it does happen sometimes, and it does seem to happen especially when you have more than 3 speakers paired together. Personally, I do find that Soundboxes and JBL speaker pairing protocols are a lot more stable, but they're just not as accommodating as Sony's. However, like I mentioned earlier, both the Soundbox and JBL do have those audio outjacks, so you can always daisy chain any other speakers to these 2 speakers and get them to play in sync. But with all that being said, if you're trying to choose between any of these 3 speakers, they all have their own standout characteristics, and depending on your needs, you'll be better off with one over the other. The Soundboks 4 is the best option here if you need something that's rugged and easy to transport, but you also need something with big sound and a very long battery life, with an option to extend its battery life because you can always swap out the battery. Plus, its port panel is the most robust here because you can always connect it to a mixer as well. But if you want something with thunderous bass and you want something with a light feature, then you'll be better off with the JBL Partybox 710. The thing is, this speaker isn't as portable and you're going to be tethered to the power cord. But if you want something that's in the middle, something that has a light feature but something that also has a built-in battery, then you can always go with the Sony XV900. But even though the speaker sounds great and it gets plenty loud, it's just not going to sound as impressive as these other 2 speakers. But it's definitely still a great option for your man cave, especially since you can always hook it up to your TV. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something if I'm really proud of it.